Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The fire itself was started on a second floor, resulting from candles.
The investigation into a Gastown hotel that went up in flames.
And you don't even give it a chance to try to get anything, and that's not fair.
And why the fire has been ruled an accident.
Really makes you feel like you don't have rights on your own land, dignity on your own land.
Frustration for families as traditional Indigenous baby names aren't being recognized in BC. And protesters dragging angry commuters on the Second Narrows Bridge, and another arrest.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. A massive fire that gutted a Gastown building is being deemed an accident. It forced dozens of people from their homes and closed businesses. Now, this news comes the same day the structure is being demolished. Dan Burrett joins us live tonight from outside the former Winters Hotel. Dan, what sparked the fire?
Unattended candles in a second floor suite, Anita. I'm going to get out of the way as we show you some of the work that's going on right now at the former Winters Hotel. And they're trying to figure out what they can save here, and there is not much. That means many personal and business possessions may not be saved. The fire department confirms the sprinkler system was not switched on the day of the fire. That's because they shut it off after another accidental fire just days before. They ordered the building operators to get it serviced and put in a fire watch until the sprinkler system was turned back on.
The sprinkler system was shut off on Friday night, and the occupants and managers are supposed to have fire watch put in place, which this Altira did. And then they're supposed to also have their sprinkler system and fire alarm system service as soon as possible.
But it was not back on by the time the fires started on the Monday after that previous fire on the Friday. More than 70 people living in the SRO and the upper floors were forced out, along with dozens more from another hotel because of toxic smoke. Many have now been moved into other hotels. Janice Abbott, the head of Atira, which ran the Winters Hotel SRO, says she's feeling numb and not quite ready yet to comment on what the fire department announced today, Anita.
No kidding, Dan, and I imagine this is especially hard for the people who had to actually stand out there and watch their homes and their businesses get torn down today.
A lot of heartbreak, a lot of frustration here, people hoping to be able to save something. There were not only residents here who lived here for a number of years, but businesses as well that operated on ground floors. Former residents in tears as crews got to work today. They were supposed to start yesterday, but they were delayed after police checked to make sure no one was inside after getting reports someone may have gone in overnight. City officials say it was just too unsafe to try to go in and recover more of what that could have been in the stores and in people's homes. Former residents are sick over pets and other precious possessions.
Friend go in there last night to retrieve my turtle. I have a 25-year-old turtle in there. He's so big inside gingerbread. He's alive, intact. He was in the tank, and he fucked him out. He put him in a pillowcase, and he was trying to bring him down with a couple of my bins. My friend sat there for hours last night. He walked through the whole place. Everything's fine. It's got water on it. So he was trying to retrieve some of my husband's ashes, and my turtle. The cop bum rushed him and dropped the turtle at the top of the stairs and told us we weren't allowed to have him.
Yeah, I'm a musician. And my instruments, my guitar, and my amp and my microphone and stuff that I've recorded, everything, like pictures, everything, My brother died recently in the last couple months.
City officials hope to have this demolition done by tomorrow afternoon. And just before we were on air, a gentleman who runs a watch shop, a horologist, parked right here and was able to save an old wooden chest full of watch straps. He says he's hoping that there may be something else he can find in there, tools that he's been collecting since he was 17 years old. But as we heard, people sick over pets. They're not sure of their futures. They're not sure if there's anything else they can salvage, whether it's the woman's husband's ashes or those musicians and their instruments. Lots of work yet to be done. Anita.
Temperatures below zero. A snowstorm in southeastern Saskatchewan. This probably wasn't the weather the two bears at the Saskatoon Forestry Farm Park and Zoo were hoping for. The grizzlies woke up from their torpor, or winter rest, a couple of weeks ago. But zoo manager Jeff Mitchell says they likely don't mind the cooler weather.
And if it got a little warm, they'd actually come out and stick their head out a little bit. Our guys, though, they really, once they fall asleep, they're very, very happy being asleep.
Mitchell says the two grizzlies lost more than 100 pounds each during their 5-month slumber. Now it's time for Coda and Mistea to slowly start gaining some weight again. But sharing is not always easy. Oh!
And that's just bears being bears and getting a little bit out of each other and just trying to show whose box is whose.
The two grizzlies in Saskatoon aren't the only bears in the province getting up after winter. Black bears are quite common in Saskatchewan, especially up north. U of S biologist Philip McLaughlin says May is your best bet to see them moving about.
Especially the males, those tend to start to wander more right around this time of year. But most of the bears are up starting now. The males first, and then followed by the females and their cubs.
Back at the Saskatoon Zoo, other animals are also waking up to a chilly spring. The black-tailed prairie dogs were spending their winter down in their burrows. Now they're busy digging again. As for the dingoes, they're awake year-round, but still, we checked in to see how they're feeling about their fellow zoo animals starting to wake up.
What's your comment on the situation? Yeah, I wouldn't say. No comment.
Teresa Kleem, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Welcome back. You're watching CBC Vancouver News at 6. We just had a little bit of a technical issue there, but we'd like to continue on with today's stories. Now, there are many questions still plaguing the Ukrainian family who just barely escaped the fire set off in their Victoria home yesterday. Today, police released this surveillance video of the suspect vehicle passing through the Caledonia Street neighborhood on the night of the blaze. It's described as a light, possibly white, four-door vehicle. The house is still closed off as the damage gets assessed. The home belonged to the family of Father Yuri Vishnevsky, a parish priest at the Ukrainian Catholic Church of St. Nicholas. The fire is deemed as deliberately set, but what's not clear is whether this is a hate crime. BC Premier John Horgan is calling on the province to lend the support to the family.
Father Vishnevsky and his family have been through a tremendous ordeal over the past 24 hours. What we can do as a community is continue to stand with the Ukrainian community, not just here in BC, but indeed internationally.
The injuries of all members of the family are now considered non-life-threatening. Vancouver police are warning Langara College students and the surrounding community after 3 indecent acts took place at the school in the past 5 weeks. The first happened on March 20th when a man exposed his genitals to a student in the college library. The second on March 27th when a man exposed himself to a Langara staff member. And the third this past Tuesday when again a man exposed himself at the college library. In all three incidents, the suspect is described as a dark-skinned man, about 5 feet inches to 5 feet 7 inches tall. Police believe the same person is responsible for all three acts. Well, the province is committing to restoring watersheds and wetlands as another way to mitigate the impacts of climate change and secure quality drinking water. BC budgeted $30 million worth of grants for this effort, half of which will be given to Watersheds BC to lead restoration projects in collaboration with First Nations. And the other $15 million will be given to 6 organizations supporting this work, including BC Wildlife Federation, alongside protecting ecosystems. The province says this will also help create and maintain local jobs. BC says more than 50 projects have already been approved. Well, huge lineups, early morning waits, and a lot of frustration. It's clear by the scenes at passport offices in Metro Vancouver this month that people are ready to travel. As the CBC's Zara Premji tells us, a staff shortage and an influx of people wanting to renew their documents has left many in limbo.
Cheers, tears, and claps breaking out as the first person in 3 hours is let in through the doors of the passport office.
3 a.m. We've been waiting. 2 a.m. We've been waiting.
We were standing out on Hastings Street, in the dark and the cold.
People camping on the floor, sleeping on the cold tiles, children even doing their homework in the lineup, with no certainty they'll get their passport and make that flight later today or tomorrow.
We're still waiting in line to get a rush passport. I travel out tomorrow morning.
I'm confused now. What should I do right now?
After several failed attempts to get his first ever Canadian passport, Hamid Rahimi could miss seeing his father in Iran for the very last time.
I must go to Iran because my father is passed away and there is a ceremony for my father.
He's one of hundreds waiting while hope fades.
I'm here with my daughter-in-law whose passport got some water damage, so she needed to replace it. And this is the 6th trip to Passport Canada to try and get it resolved.
For many who have waited 20 or more hours, they're still not sure they'll be able to get onto their flight. They do say they will be out thousands of dollars from missing work, canceling flights and hotels and more.
There are something like 20 plus booths available. We were told earlier this morning that the reason they're not staffed is for COVID protection for their employees.
Service Canada says with the easing of restrictions and resumption of travel, demands have grown, saying it received approximately 69,000 applications in April of last year. And in the first 3 weeks of this month, there have been about 194,000 applications. And for those who have time to spare, plan ahead and mail in your application. For those in a rush, be prepared for long waits and possibly a missed trip. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
First Nations governments will get a one-time provincial grant to make up for financial losses felt throughout the pandemic. The province and First Nations have a revenue-sharing commitment in 2018. It's on the funds coming from casinos and gambling centres, but the last 2 years saw an 80% decline in that income.
The relief grant will ensure First Nations communities will continue to recover from the economic and other hardships created by the pandemic.
Like all governments, we recognize that First Nations governments need the same kind of stable, predictable funding to fund their priorities.
Those priorities will go towards new projects and those put on hold over the last year, and range from infrastructure and new builds such as community centres to social services and education and cultural revitalization. Well, for most new parents, the right to name your baby is a privilege that comes with having children. But historically, this right was taken away from many Indigenous families. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission called for that to change. But as Balpuri shows us, some families are still fighting.
A newborn baby brings with her a chance to reclaim culture and language.
This here is Aletla Joseph Curry. Aletla means raspberry or wild raspberry in Skhopmishnecham, which is one of her ancestral languages.
But it's not the language of BC Vital Statistics. The name was rejected because the province only recognizes Latin alphabet letters, standard French accents, apostrophes, hyphens, and periods. No numbers.
The suggestions were to spell her name incorrectly or to give her an English name.
The same thing has happened to other First Nations parents.
So his name is Glugolas Galaask Shaw.
It's a place of significance where historically a lot of good things happen there.
3 months after birth, the little one still isn't registered.
It's 2022. Our people should be honored. Our people should be uplifted.
Legally registered names are necessary for a birth certificate, healthcare, child benefits, and much more. Last year, Ottawa announced a process for all Indigenous people, residential school survivors, and families to reclaim their traditional names on passports and other government ID. But provinces and territories are responsible for names and name changes. In Manitoba, 14-month-old Tokalaway Chiwe Thunder Sky Cat's name was arbitrarily changed. It came back registered, but morphed into 3 names instead of 1, with the accents missing.
They don't respect our names. They don't respect how we want to name our babies. They don't respect how we spell. Okay.
Manitoba is looking at legislative amendments to allow special characters and names, and this week BC promised a change. Health Minister Adrian Dix says a new inclusive digital font that allows for Indigenous languages to be included in official records is in the works, but he gave no timeline.
She needs to be able to have her correct name and documentation now, today. That's the issue.
Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, in Agassiz, cows have been freed for the first time this year after spending the winter months indoors. Each spring, the cows at the Creekside Cheese and Creamery are let out of their barn. At the farm, owners have turned it into a public spectacle, calling it Moo Let the Cows Out. Around 500 people turned up to watch the cows go to the pasture this year, double the number of people who showed up to the first event 3 years ago.
So when the cows go to pasture, they're super excited. So they know they've got fresh grass, they're going out into the sunshine, the fresh air, the springy sod, and they run and they jump and they buck and they play with each other, and the joy is just so infectious, and that's what I think captures everyone's hearts.
The farm owners say they carefully pick the day to free the cows, and that all depends on the weather and just how much grass has grown. The cows are free to roam until October. That's when they will head back inside for the winter. It's a little bit like me, stay inside all winter and then freed out into the community.
Yeah, totally. Let out to pastures. And Anita, the cows and humans couldn't have picked a better day to enjoy the fresh grass and the sunshine. I've got to tell you, I could really relate to those smiles on the bovine faces. It is feeling good out here. And let it be marked that today is the day that the first day I'm not wearing a jacket outside. So they are coming. Let me take you to the current temperatures where it's really the sunshine helping with the heat. Just a 12 at YVR right now, 10 out towards Abbotsford. So nothing to write home about as far as temperatures, still below our 14-degree seasonal average. But we have lost the showers. You can see that low rotating off the coast of Vancouver Island. That's what did bring us some dark clouds, a few showers to start. We are seeing some lightning strikes in the Okanagan. So heads up, you may get a passing cell. Same story in through the Kootenays over the next couple of hours. But for us on the south coast, definitely heading into a drier and sunnier Friday. Now the model's picking up. You can see what looks like pockets of rain, but I think for the most part, those are just bubbling cumulus. I think we're looking at a generally sunny Friday. I think we can keep that going into Saturday, Anita. And I may have spotted first warm up this season. I'll tell you how long we have to wait though coming up.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. And I did notice that you're not wearing a jacket. It looks great.
Thank you. I feel great.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, tension is growing between commuters and old-growth logging protesters. A shocking scene today on the Second Narrows Bridge and an arrest as Metro Vancouver traffic was brought to a standstill for what protesters say is the 10th time this month.
We're all gonna die.
if we don't do something.
This shows drivers getting out of their vehicles on the bridge just after 7 this morning. They're dragging the protesters along the road, seemingly frustrated with another blockade on a Metro Vancouver highway. There were about half a dozen people standing on the bridge demanding the government bring an end to old-growth logging in BC. The woman arrested today for mischief brings the total number of people taken into custody to 84 since January. And the group Save Old Growth has targeted highways and bridges more than a dozen times across the province, from Victoria to Revelstoke, including the Malahat on Vancouver Island yesterday. They've asked to meet with the province's forestry minister, and while the commuters were more than a little frustrated this morning, callers to CBC's BC Today were mixed on the group's tactics.
I agree that we need to stop the old growth logging. I 100% agree with that. But the way these guys are protesting is just stupid. They are making more enemies than they are friends. And I'm one of the people that gets caught up in these stupid traffic things, having to go from Abbotsford to North Van every day and back.
People are frustrated, right? What else are people supposed to do? They don't listen to regular protests. They don't listen to our letters. They don't listen to ENGOs.
A lot of people get pissed off, even though we agree with him. And I heard about people now getting out of their cars. I mean, it just sounds like, is this really the way?
That sense of right cause but wrong tactics is also shared by the District of North Vancouver councillor Lisa Murray. She's now calling on the BC Forestry Minister to meet with the protesters, but says she's concerned about the increased levels of frustration surrounding these highway shutdowns.
I think, unfortunately, the message is being lost because this story has turned to an issue of traffic jams. And not just about what the protesters are protesting, which is, a complex and critical time in our society.
To understand what rights people have to protest and where those rights end, I'm joined by David Millward, a program director and associate law professor at the University of Victoria. Thanks for being with us.
Not a problem at all.
Okay, so clearly a lot of passion and opinions in all of this. So, David, can you tell us right off the bat, what rights do protesters actually have in a situation like this and, the way that they're going about blocking highways and bridges?
Okay. So, first of all, we actually have Section 2C of the Charter, which actually does provide for freedom of assembly. However, the courts have provided some scope to that, and that is that certainly there's rights to protest and to parades and to making your public opinions known and all the rest of it, but it does not extend to actions that seriously threaten the public peace. And more specifically, some court decisions have actually extended that understanding to it does not extend to the right to block or obstruct a highway. And more specifically, that gives scope for Section 423 of the Criminal Code, which actually makes it a criminal offense to intentionally block a highway to obstruct lawful use of that highway.
Okay, and that's also perhaps why we're seeing so many arrests in these protests as well. What do you think when you see videos like the one today where people out of frustration or disagreement try to stop the protesters themselves?
Well, the thing is that it seems like one of those situations where no one's really in the right. So, I mean, certainly these protesters are going to bring themselves within the ambit of Section 423 of the Criminal Code. But for the people who are frustrated with the blockage of the highway and took matters into their own hands, they themselves risk prosecution for committing assault. Now, if you have a problem with what someone else is doing and you think it's illegal, and it's obstructing your own lawful enjoyment of what you want to do, the way the Canadian legal system looks at it, the proper channel is to call law enforcement authorities and let them deal with it. But when you take matters into your own hands like that and basically start applying physical force to the people who are offending you in some way, you risk prosecution for assault on yourself as well.
Okay. We see arrests happen in protests all the time. How much of those, or how many of those arrests are actually being prosecuted to the full extent, and how many of those charges are being stayed or, coming down to a lesser charge?
That's a hard thing to gauge. I'm not aware of any statistical studies or anything else like that. But when you actually do get into matters of property destruction and maybe sometimes even some assaults occur in the way. My sense is that the police and the prosecution will make a real effort to prosecute all the way through to conviction. But sometimes these scenarios are where you have multitudes of people participating in it. So sometimes the police and the prosecution sometimes have to pick and choose, see which ones they think most deserve, the ones that they most need to make a statement against, and maybe for a lot of the others not follow through, because that would be a strain on resources if you did that kind of mass prosecution.
David Millward, an associate law professor at the University of Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you.
From 128 small towns across British Columbia, we are now down to just 3 in our search for the best one in the province. Ucluelet beat out Lillooet last night, so it's heading to the finals. Now it's Kimberley versus Smithers in the battle of the interior and the north. Justin McElroy reports on the matchup between 2 idyllic communities with passionate residents.
Turns out the best 2 small towns in the north and interior of this province have a lot in common.
The ski hill, you know, the tourism, the former mine, you kind of go down the list and it's check, check, check.
Smithers and Kimberley share a number of attributes, but there are differences. Kimberley is somewhat isolated and off the main highway, while Smithers has long been the hub for the region, and unlike many small towns, has seen its population stay stable for many decades, with no major ups or downs.
Diversity is it. Diversity of people, diversity of economy, diversity of opinion. It's all those things that make Smithers the best small town in British Columbia.
In the heart of the Bulkley Valley, Smithers has always had forests and farms, mountains and rivers, but it's what's inside the town, filling the main streets, art spaces and small businesses that give the place its pulse.
It is the people who take advantage of the spectacular natural assets, and I realize all of British Columbia has that. BC is a beautiful province, but Smithers has, you know, to the max, the things that attract people.
Kimberley has had quite a climb over the last 2 decades. One centered around resource extraction around the old mine is now centered around being an outdoor recreation hub.
You know, when you're a one-trick pony and you lose the pony, it's pretty devastating.
The Sullivan Mine was the bedrock of Kimberley's economy for a century, but mines don't last forever, and the town had a plan.
Thankfully, there was a fair degree of warning that the ore body was going to be mined out. So we built tourism amenities. We took the amenities and built tourism up.
So they built up backcountry ski and golf courses, created BC's largest municipal park, but also converted the mine into a new sort of attraction.
Grandpa can take his grandkids in here and say, this is what it used to be like.
The underground mining railway shows just how the mine operated back in the day. And while life in Kimberley is different now, there's some things that stay constant.
One traffic light. And the city'd like to put in another traffic light, but the town isn't having that. We are very proud of our one traffic light.
And proud of a lot more than that.
And I hear, you know, a lot of people saying, God, we love to live here. Why wouldn't you? You know, it's 5 minutes to work, 5 minutes to ski hill, 5 minutes to the golf course. What else do you want in life?
It's the feeling every small town hopes for, but few pull it off as well as Kimberley and Smithers. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Kimberley.
And as we near the end of the voting day, it does look more and more like Kimberley will take that final spot. The Kootenay town up 55% against Smithers at 45%. Of course, there is still time to vote. You have until 10 p.m. Pacific to do it online, 11 p.m. Mountain Time. That's at cbc.ca/BC. The number of people in hospital here in BC with COVID has jumped to 485. That's up more than 100 patients since last week, with 38 in critical care. In Ontario, the province is in the throes of their 6th wave. Lauren Pelly with this story now on how infections are hitting children, their families, and the healthcare workers treating them.
Thank you. Let's get our food.
Another night of delivery for Nicole Ryakovich's family of 4. Over the last month, COVID hit them one by one, forcing the Toronto family to stay home for days at a time from work and school.
It's terrifying as a parent.
Ryakovich says her son got sick first back in March. He only had 1 vaccine dose, and one night the 5-year-old began struggling to breathe. Ryakovich cared for him at home, but says it was a tough decision.
Do I bring my child in who's had a fever for 3 days, or do I stay home because it could be a 9-hour wait
Healthcare workers in several provinces told CBC News children's hospitals are among those struggling with staff shortages and high patient volumes from COVID and other illnesses.
Their health workers would be similarly affected by disease spread within their communities.
There's just a huge number of increased number of kids coming in with upper respiratory illness and related complications.
Ça, c'est la reason for the visit.
In Ottawa, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario is now seeing up to double the typical number of patients in its emergency department and has cancelled some of its surgeries.
The double whammy for us is that we also have many staff, medical staff and volunteers that are off as well because of COVID symptoms.
It's a similar situation at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, where emergency visits are back to pre-pandemic levels, while roughly 1 in 10 staff are off sick.
We're seeing a lot of kids age 0 to 5 who are not immunized. And so we're particularly conservative in ensuring that no one's coming to work sick.
Although hospitals are under pressure, pediatricians say parents should seek medical advice if their child's COVID symptoms start to worsen, including a high fever or trouble breathing. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
As Russia's war with the Ukraine drags on, more sanctions by the Russian government focusing on Canada. Who is on the list and what Premier John Horgan has to say about it next.
Images of a royal visit. A flotilla follows the Britannia beneath Vancouver's Lions Gate Bridge. A flypast through threatening skies. Fireworks lighting the night, even some politics. A premier on the eve of an expected election, enjoying the limelight. Pomp, pageantry, practicality. A table setting fit for a queen that may turn a tidy profit.
The market price of the table when it was set was over $65,000.
And what do you think it's worth after the Queen used it?
Sir, it's worth $250,000.
Oh, there she's coming. There she is. Most of all, people. People who love their Queen.
Thank you very much.
But the royal visit really wasn't about turning a quick profit, or partisan political gain for that matter. It was about a queen and her people. In British Columbia, 4 days of mutual affection. Larry Stout, CBC News Specials in Vancouver.
The site of Expo 86 has been sold to a company controlled by a Hong Kong businessman. The price could be as high as $500 million. British Columbia Premier Bill Vander Zalm made the announcement in Vancouver today. But as Keith Bogue reports, the controversy over the Premier's handling of the sale may not be over yet.
With one flourish, all of the speculation ended. This is what will happen to the Expo site over the next quarter of a century. The winning proposal came complete with a video promotion showing the mix of housing and commercial developments which will transform much of Vancouver's waterfront. Rumors had estimated the sale price at between $200 and $300 million. It's more.
A guaranteed base price of $320 million in cash.
And with bonuses, the final sale price will be $500 million.
We actually have no problems ever raising money.
About the buyer, there was never any doubt. Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing wasn't there himself. Instead, he was represented by his son.
I do pretty well in contributing to society here.
The spectacle of the announcement was matched only by the controversy which has surrounded the sale of the site for nearly 2 months. As the deal was being closed with Li Ka-shing, Vancouver businessman Peter Toigo, a personal friend of the Premier's, was making last-minute proposals of his own for the site. Proposals that were steered toward Cabinet by the Premier himself. That led to complaints from Cabinet Minister Grace McCarthy that the Premier was interfering with the process. This afternoon, they tried to put it all behind them.
I feel great, and I feel great having the Premier here, and if this will help.
But questions about the Premier and Toigo persist, and he doesn't like it.
If somebody comes to Cabinet with a proposal for Cabinet, Cabinet gets to see it, and Bill Vander Zalm doesn't hang on to it for himself.
Now the opposition in the legislature wants to know whether the Premier has a business relationship with Toigo, as well as a personal one. Keith Bogue, CBC News, Vancouver.
The world has watched the Ukrainian city of Mariupol get destroyed, one bomb, one building at a time. Russia has laid siege to a place once home to 400,000 people, but today there's a new layer to that horror. These are satellite images of a nearby town. They show rows and rows of new graves being added next to an existing cemetery over a period of about 2 weeks starting in March. Mariupol's mayor says they are mass graves, trenches where Russians are burying the city's dead to cover up their crimes. And there is still a pocket of Ukrainian resistance in Mariupol, though, and it has been under relentless attack by the Russians. But as David Common explains today, Russia's president stepped back from the idea of storming it, ordering a new strategy instead.
Even as Russian rockets pound Ukraine, their forces have made little forward progress so far. They have, though, reached the gates of the sprawling steel plant in Mariupol, where 1,000 civilians are believed to be hiding, with Ukrainian defenders in the tunnels beneath. The Russians have strung flags telling the Ukrainians to use this as a surrender corridor. No one's accepted the offer. No matter to Vladimir Putin, who now declares the key city liberated. His defense minister, not seen during the weeks of military stumbles, suddenly appeared with his boss, who rarely does face-to-face meetings. Block off this industrial area, Putin ordered, so that a fly cannot pass through. A few dozen residents of Mariupol managed to escape on buses, but 100,000 are still believed to be in the besieged city. They were bombing us from day one, says Valentina Andrushenko. They're demolishing everything. The Russians may have been pushed out of the north, but Ukrainians fear they'll be back. So older people, women, young men, all learning how to move while shooting, including Max, who's 19. He's scared to tell his mother he's here. Why do you need to be ready when you look at what's happening?
Because Russia only want to kill all us. That's all. If we don't kill them, they kill us.
Peter Maslow should be teaching at a school back home in the Czech Republic, but he feels this is a better use of his time now.
This means that if NATO and Biden does not send the troops in here, then civilians like me have to do it. I'm not Czech, no race. You can look at me. I do not look that much good. Civilians like me, like my friends, have to do the job.
In a nearby classroom, civilians are learning to reach the injured while under fire.
You need to do this as fast as you can. Yeah.
Budana Petrachuk is a fifth-year medical student, now demonstrating the use of a tourniquet to halt rapid blood loss.
I think that all of Ukrainians need to know how to use it, because we don't know what happened tomorrow. I don't know what happened tomorrow.
That sums up a lot of the thinking here. While there's certainly pride that Ukraine has held out for so long against a much bigger enemy, there is also recognition that everything could change, and suddenly so. David Common, CBC News, Lviv, Ukraine.
Russia has banned dozens of Canadians from entering its country and included the Kremlin's stop list. BC Premier John Horgan, who told reporters today he considered it a badge of honor. Other politicians, a handful of journalists, and CBC's president are also included. David Cochrane spoke with some of them today.
This does not weaken our resolve one whit.
It's been more than a month since Russia banned Justin Trudeau. Now the Kremlin is targeting his staff.
Canada remains determined to be there to support Ukraine.
61 people from Canada's who's who added to Russia's no-go list, including the premiers of Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia.
I consider that a badge of honor, not for myself, but for British Columbia.
Russia has previously banned hundreds of MPs and senators as part of a continuing cycle of sanctions and counter-sanctions. The list growing now to include military and intelligence officials, even some mayors.
They're doing this because, quite frankly, I think they're losing the public relations war.
Free Libre Ukraine. Jim Watson likely ended up on this list for his role in this protest last month outside the Russian embassy in Ottawa.
Well, on the one side, it's sort of laughable. I had no plans to go to Moscow or any part of Russia.
That may be true for most people on the Kremlin's list, but not everyone.
It does make me sad that I'm not going to be able to return. Of that list of 61 people,
we've heard heavy artillery in the distance. The Globe and Mail's Mark McKinnon has been covering the war and lived in Moscow during the early years of Putin's presidency. He sees a long conflict ahead.
history hasn't been kind to Russian leaders such as Nikita Khrushchev, who backed down in confrontations with the West.
McKinnon isn't the only journalist being banned. The editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail and some reporters with the National Post have also been sanctioned, as well as the head of CTV News and the president of the CBC. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
As the Vatican finalizes the dates and stops of the Pope's visit to Canada, a Métis delegation from Manitoba is in Italy to discuss the harm caused by residential schools. Delegates asked the Pope to bless the grave of Louis Riel. Olivia Stefanovic tells us more about their discussions.
Manitoba Métis delegates describe their one-hour meeting with Pope Francis as a touching moment and one that they've been waiting years to have with the pontiff. This was a private meeting with 55 delegates who exchanged stories with the Pope and spoke about their shared history with the Roman Catholic Church, which dates back about 2 centuries. The delegates also spoke to the Pope about abuses caused by church members at residential schools and day schools, which operated like residential schools, except students went home at night. The Pope asked for forgiveness in this meeting, and many tears were shed.
It was a very personal moment for us. And we came what we said. We come with a message of hope, revitalization, and how do we move forward now? We can't change history, but we definitely can change the future.
The delegates also asked the Pope to come to Winnipeg during an upcoming papal visit to Canada and bless the grave of Louis Riel, who was a Métis leader and the founder of Manitoba. Now, the delegates didn't leave with a firm commitment, but dates and locations for this upcoming trip are still being finalized. The Manitoba Métis Federation had a separate meeting with Pope Francis weeks after other Indigenous delegations because they are no longer part of the Métis National Council following an internal dispute over identity. And the Manitoba Métis Federation came to this meeting with a very different message, and that is that they want the Pope to revitalize the Church's presence in Manitoba Métis communities. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
If you or someone you know is looking for support, you can reach the National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. It operates 24 hours and is available to anyone impacted. Well, it's only April, but already wildfire season is in full swing in the U.S., with fires burning structures in Arizona. Why there is no longer a down season. That's next. And at 6:42, you are looking at a live shot of Burnaby tonight, looking at Metrotown. A beautiful day, but will it last? Johanna has the weekend forecast coming up.
Our music item is next on today's show. And George Zuckerman, our musical director, is going to talk to Margaret Stott about the trumpet and the trombone.
Well, Mr. Zuckerman, in the past few weeks you've told us something about the woodwind instruments. Could you tell us something about the major differences between the woodwind instruments and the instruments we have here?
Well, Margaret, today we were going to see some of the brass instruments.
Well, what type of music do these instruments play?
Well, as you know, the trumpet looks very much like a bugle, and of course it's the same family, so very often the trumpet is used for bugle calls. And here's an example of that. Now you hear that the trombone is a lower pitched instrument, and very often it's used for jocular sounding, for funny sounding passages in the orchestra. And here's the way the trombone can sound in a very characteristic way. But equally often, the trombone is used for very lovely melodies and lyric passages, and here's an example of that. He is giving what we call vibrato. He's giving a little musical sound. It sounds much more interesting. It'll be very dull. Listen to the difference. He'll play a few notes first without vibrato, and then he'll add it.
Well, what is that metal piece that they put in the bottoms of their instruments?
Well, that is a mute. And in the little piece that Mr. Reed will now play with the rest of the ensemble, you'll get an idea of how it changes the quality.
Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us this afternoon, Mr. Zuckerman. We've learned something about the brass instruments of today. And now on to our next item.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Let's go now to that critical fire danger erupting across parts of the American Southwest. Tonight, there are half a dozen large wildfires burning in 3 states. Extremely dry conditions and high winds are fanning the flames. And as Lindsay Duncombe shows us, this early and intense fire season could be the new normal on both sides of the border.
It's early and it's intense. Wildfire season has arrived in Arizona. The tunnel fire northeast of Flagstaff has destroyed more than a dozen structures, including homes.
My barn was already burned to the ground, and the house was in flames.
Hundreds of people forced to flee.
I cried driving away because you just don't know. You don't know if you're going to come home to anything.
Wind is making everything worse. It's whipping up the flames and making it too dangerous for firefighting aircraft to fly.
When we're talking flame lengths upwards of 100+ feet, there's really no piece of aviation or equipment that is going to be able to slow that down.
In New Mexico, firefighters are working to protect a natural gas pipeline and phone and internet lines.
What we are seeing is we have several critical infrastructure items in the area of the fire.
Those who study climate change say these fires should be a warning to Canada. Here's Natural Resources Canada's fire risk forecast by month. April is average. By May, there's higher risk in Saskatchewan and Alberta. In June, then July, much of the country faces higher than average risk. And by August, fire risk is expected to be well above average for the most western provinces.
Right now, they're running ahead of schedule on the fire season in the Southwest United States. So that should be a bit of a warning signal to us that don't be complacent. Let's prepare for the fire season early in Canada.
That means checking insurance, thinking about escape plans, bracing for the danger and fear some Americans are enduring right now. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Gosh, those images are always horrific to see, Joe, but to see them so early like that, I mean, I feel lucky that we're not quite into our full fire season yet.
Yeah, as you said, I think probably very triggering images for people in the interior, knowing our fire season is around the corner. But we are in a very different boat, although as we heard, we really can't rely on the current state of our snowpack and weather conditions to predict what will happen late in the summer. But I wanted to show you snow on the ground. And this is part of the reason why we're not talking about wildfire season other than the Northwest or flood season for that matter. This is a look at the snow on the ground, and you can see, especially for our coastal mountain ranges and the Rockies, there is substantial snow still on the ground. And in fact, we're still accumulating our snowpack. This is just a look at the next 24, 48 hours. Not a lot of fresh snow, but very different picture than the past couple of years that we are still accumulating as we head into late June. Not out of the question. We have seen accumulating snowpacks through to May before, but definitely the signal of La Nina is very much in place with the cooler than normal conditions. And of course, we've been feeling that on the ground as well, struggling to hit our seasonal temperatures these past few weeks, I should say, if not months. The forecast does have us clearing out a little bit across most of southern BC for tomorrow. Just watching for a stray shower, though. You can see that sort of popping up in the green tomorrow afternoon. We definitely have a break Saturday between systems. In fact, looking like mainly blue skies for everyone through Saturday with seasonal temperatures. It's Sunday that we'll get the next Pacific system rolling in. I know we have a couple of Vancouver Canadian games that we need to watch for after getting rained out last night, and it does look like the next couple of nights looking good. Sunday, we'll have to watch for that afternoon game. Conditions across central and northern BC have been sunny and mild for the past few days. You haven't seen the impact of that rotating low affecting the southern half of the province. Williams Lake, they'll look for a few flurries in the morning hours. Not out of the question we could see a pop-up thunderstorm in Kelowna, but Prince George, Fort St. John, Dease Lake, and in fact, Prince Rupert, I think we're looking at a relatively sunny day for your Friday forecast. We'll get back up to that seasonal mark, as I mentioned, on Saturday. Sunday, watching for those showers, but not a washout. Getting into some heavier rain for Monday and Tuesday when our temperatures come down. Still down below that seasonal mark as we head into the end of next week, but the meteorologists across the Pacific Northwest were all chattering this afternoon. Our latest long-range forecast model, the update that brings us through to May 1st, had big signs of warming across Western Canada. So maybe that's the turn. Keep your eyes on May 1st. I'll keep you posted.
I'll mark it on the calendar. Thanks, Joe.
Me too. You're welcome.
Well, the Miss Indian World pageant promotes itself as a week-long exchange of Indigenous ideas, traditions, and goodwill. And a young woman from Saskatoon is one of the contestants who will be heading to the event in New Mexico this month. Jason Warwick spoke with her about her goals for it all.
Hello, my name is Shante Spidel, and I'm the 2022 contestant for Miss Indian World. And I come from the Saptai Cree Nation and the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. Hamadakiape, Chante Mawashte, Nanape Chuziapi, Chajemi Tawa, Chante Spidel, Lakota Pi Chanku Luta, Wichoni Washdevi, Imachiapi.
Shante Spidel is a busy young woman. She just finished writing and performing in a play at Saskatoon's Broadway Theatre, all while completing her studies in the Indian Teacher Education Program at the University of Saskatchewan. And later this month, she'll head to the United States to compete for the title of Miss Indian World. It takes place in May at the Gathering of Nations in the state of New Mexico, one of the largest Indigenous cultural festivals in the world.
All of these contestants, and I like to think so as myself, we live a healthy lifestyle. We are ambassadors of our culture and our language, and this pageant allows us to share our story and allows us to share a little bit of our culture and our language.
Contestants will be evaluated on their public speaking and work on social issues during the 5-day event. Spidel wants to continue advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women and their families. The women's cultural skills will also be tested. Spidel plans to show off her specialty, jingle dress dancing, and will sing this prayer gifted to her by her late grandfather. Spidell says that win or lose, her main goal is to inspire Indigenous young women, something she's already doing here at home. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Pomp and circumstance to celebrate the Queen's 96th birthday. The tributes both traditional and not so much, coming out.
There is hope on the horizon as the first cruise vessel in Atlantic Canada will be in our waters this week. On Thursday, cruise season will begin when a vessel docks in Louisbourg. At the end of the cruise season in 2019, very few could have predicted what the next few years would do to the industry. Tourism operators saw huge decreases in visitor numbers. Downtown Sydney saw less shoppers. Many businesses rely heavily on boat traffic, and numbers show how important the cruise industry is.
It also means that the economic impact, which for Cape Breton was around 56 million, will come back to Cape Breton almost, probably not to the same extent, but to a large extent of the 2019 numbers. So it's looking great, and people are excited about it.
The Port of Sydney lost about $330,000 in revenue just last year. Since the last vessel came to Sydney, a lot of changes happened. The new NSCC is spurring a surge for downtown businesses, and many will now be seeing cruise passengers for the first time.
Really excited to see the response from these new businesses and what the cruise ship industry is going to have on them. So I think about the bookstore, the grocery store, there's a maternity store. There's so many new businesses, restaurants, what have you, in that downtown core who haven't been able to experience the benefits of the cruise industry. So I'm really excited to see the feedback and the reflection on that.
Outside the CBRM, rural communities rely heavily on tourist traffic. The Highland Village Museum in Iona welcomes thousands of visitors that come from off the boats. 2019 was considered a banner year by many in the sector, and losses over the past 2 years will be hard to recoup.
The cruise ship traffic to Iona is big for us. In 2019, it represented 38% of our visitation. And that's with tours coming directly, half-day tours coming directly to Iona, as well as full-day tours either with Badek or with Eskazoni Cultural Journeys.
Chesson says in 2020, numbers at the museum were down 90%. Now, Marlene Usher said experts are not expecting numbers to be comparable to 2019, but it's the start of a long recovery. The Port of Sydney has 83 scheduled cruises with more than 180,000 passengers expected. Matthew Moore, CBC News, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver's Gloria Makarenko at the annual Because Mothers Matter Awards on May 4th. Celebrate women's extraordinary achievements at this year's event. Learn more at mothersmattercentre.ca. And the Doxa Documentary Film Festival returns May 5th to 15th. Get your tickets at doxafestival.ca.
The Queen is celebrating her 96th birthday at her estate in eastern England, where she's been joined by family members and friends. At Windsor Castle, meanwhile, the Queen's Guard paid a special tribute. Buckingham Palace has released a special photo to mark the occasion. It shows the Queen with 2 ponies, which reflects her longtime interest in horses. Mattel, an American toy manufacturer, just released a new Barbie honoring the Queen, who is marking her Platinum Jubilee. That's 70 years on the throne. She was only 25 years old when she became Queen in 1952 and is the longest-serving monarch in British history. Well, if you're on a low-sodium diet and you miss your salty foods, some researchers in Japan may have a solution for you, but you'll have to know how to use chopsticks. These chopsticks use a weak electrical current to stimulate sodium ions in the food that enhances the salty flavor without increasing the actual amount of salt. The chopsticks connect to a mini computer that the diner wears on their wrist. In clinical trials, people say foods tasted up to 1.5 times saltier than they really are. A high salt consumption can contribute to health problems like high blood pressure and strokes. I'm not on a low sodium diet, but I'm 100% into those chopsticks. Might have to get me a pair. All right, thank you for being with us on CBC Vancouver News at 6 tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow.